Buster!
Hey, what's happening? I hope you can hear me.
I got you.
I apologize.
No, were you kidding me? So wait, before we get into this, you sold Vermont?
No. So, first off, life happens, right? So I, grew up in Vermont. I have all my family's in Vermont. My little sister owns a dairy farm that I grew up on. I went through a divorce about 3 years ago, and I moved out to Montana. My best friend from high school, she was going through cancer. At the same time I was going through a divorce. She's totally fine now. We had never dated, but now we're together. After we've known each other since high school, right? She's a superstar professor out here in Montana.
What a beautiful story!
Pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool. We've been
so
friends.
happy
We actually
for you.
spoke at each other's weddings, believe it or not.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, God bless you, brother. I'm so happy. I'm happy for you. How's Montana? I mean, you've always been on the East Coast, and now you're in Big Sky country. How's that been?
It's beautiful. It's so gorgeous to come back here. I was at the game on Sunday night, and then to fly back here yesterday and to go over the Rocky Mountains and land in Bozeman. As soon as I'm done with you, I'm going to take my dogs out on one of the mountains here to go for a hike. It's so beautiful, and it's closer to what I grew up with for sure.
Yeah.
Growing up in Vermont, where you're outside all the time and you're working all the time. I loved my time in Westchester County, but hey, the first time I was out here, Liz said, we were going through traffic and she was complaining about it. And I'm like, no. You're not complaining about traffic in Bozeman if to someone who lived in the East Coast.
Oh, that's priceless. Yeah, try being on the Merritt Parkway, right? Around 5 o'clock.
Right, exactly.
Oh, God forbid. Horrible. So let's talk about this. These Phillies are just an amazing story. And I was like watching you Sunday night. I'm like, I gotta call him. I gotta hear what he thinks about this iteration of this Phillies team.
Yeah. So last night, the Dodgers went off. Ohtani hits another home run. Freddie Freeman goes back to back. They're the team that's going to draw the most attention all year. When I turn in my power rankings this week for ESPN.com, Phillies will be number one. They're the best team in baseball right now. I've made a lot of stupid predictions in my lifetime, but I picked the Phillies to win the World Series this year, and I came away from that weekend around the team feeling really good about that. It is a deep team. It has such a strong rotation. Their bullpen is good. I think it's going to get better as the year goes along. And the culture is so excellent. Within the group, you can tell there's so much support there. And look, I think the Braves are an excellent team.
Yep.
I think the Dodgers obviously are going to be a run machine. They're going to be getting all the starting pitching back. Walker Buehler comes back last night. Clayton Kershaw, at some point, we'll see him during the year. The Phillies are the best team right now.
Yeah, and listen to your point. I mean, listen, Atlanta can rake with the best of them. Strider is a huge, devastating loss to that rotation. I mean, and then I'm glad you brought up the culture because I first and foremost is Bryce Harper. I got to tell you, Buster, following him since he came into the MLB in Washington and the whole thing, he's just a treasure. I mean, he does everything right. He is incredible. He's an ambassador to the game, an ambassador to Philadelphia. He loves the city. The fans love him, and it's his clubhouse. And those players, they just all fit in.
I would agree with you. When Harper signed with the Phillies, that 13-year contract, and we heard about how he didn't want opt-outs in his contract. He thought of it as a marriage, and he wanted to stick with the team. And when I first heard it, I'm cynical like you. I've been around a lot of players, around a lot of agents, and I'm like, yeah, right, that's Scott Boras speak. It's not true. I wasn't buying it at all. It's absolutely played out this way, And the cool thing about it in our jobs, is that we get to meet these guys when they're teenagers, right? And then we see them grow as people. Bryce has grown so much as a person. Gone from being a teenager on the cover of Sports Illustrated to now being a dad, to understanding the responsibility of his position and the platform that he has. And you're right. I think the culture's built around him, and I think Kyle Schwarber has a huge hand in shaping what goes on in that room, where he's someone every day, as Kevin Long said to me, the best teammate he's ever been around, because every day he shows up and there are two things that he cares about. One is winning that day's game, and two, how do we make this clubhouse better? Like, how do we draw in the 25th guy who's quiet, who's by himself in the corner? How do we pull that guy in? I think Schwarber is an incredible teammate. He'd be among my top 10 if I drew up a list of those since I started covering baseball.
That's such a great point. Oh my God. Because listen, you know it better than anyone. The clubhouse clicks. I mean, geez, you walk in and you have either it's by ethnicity or it's by religion. It's split up in some way. The Phillies clubhouse is entirely inclusive. It's actually a beautiful thing to see.
Oh, without a doubt. And, last spring I did a story on Schwarber and the way that he works to pull players in. And the stories are really fun. Like, there's a guy who comes in and no one really knows him, and they're trying to think about how do we put this person in a venue where he gets comfortable with other players and the other players get comfortable with him and they get to know him. And in a clubhouse, it's no holds barred. People are talking so much about the Tom Brady roast the other day. And the thing that occurred to me was, like, in a great clubhouse, that's the way it is just about every day.
Yes.
Where everybody's totally honest with each other. Everybody likes each other. Everybody respects each other. And I don't know for sure. I'm not in the room, but I suspect that, that's the way it is in the Phillies clubhouse. Look, we had Brandon Marsh wear a microphone for us in the top of the second inning, and I'm going to take you behind the curtain. So we thought it would be a fun idea, because he's roommates with Alec Boehm, to have Alec Boehm tape a question for him. And Alec, I taped one out just inside the Phillies clubhouse about 3 hours before the game, and we are 10 minutes from airtime, and Boehm comes up to me. I'm on the edge of the dugout. He said, "Hey, I thought of a better question. Is this okay?" And I'm an idiot. Like, I'm not a tech person. So I pull out my camera phone and I tape what I think is a question, and I screwed it up, and I did it twice, and I called out to him like 5 minutes later. I'm like, "Al, can we do that again? Because I think I blew it." And he said, "No problem." Comes over, we tape it. That's the question that that Marsh reacted to during the game. You don't get that in every clubhouse. You know that. Like, the idea that players would work with you, and that is Harper's. By the way, I think that is Harper's impact on the other players. Because I know at ESPN, we benefited so much from Bryce's generosity of spirit and his understanding of how, it's good for all the players if he takes advantage of those platforms.
And it's good for the game, right? Like,
yes.
The thing about what I love about Bryce is he loves the game, and he knows that, look, no one's here to try to make anybody look bad, right? We all love the game. Like, you and I got into this because we love the game. We love being around it, and we care about it, and you want to grow it. Like, that's, kind of what we do. And he gets that. And he knows that with his participation and stuff like that, it means everything. And you see it, and you saw it with Marsh and Boehm. The younger players are so heavily influenced by veterans. We've seen young players like completely diss the media because the older players told them to. Well, this is the opposite.
Yep. Yeah. And think about where that leads to, okay? Let's just play out the Boehm, and I don't want to make it specific to him, but let's just talk about a general player that was in Boehm's situation a few years ago when he, was caught saying, "I hate this place," and he's walking off the field. You and I have covered teams where the veteran players would have gone, "Yeah, whatever, dude." Left him alone. He would have been all by himself. He would have been defensive. That he would not have gotten the counsel that he did. From what I understand, it was Castellanos, and I think JT also had a hand in that, maybe Schwarber as well. And to talk to him about how to handle that, or just own it and make people relate to you. And instead of that, you may have had this guy who was a #1 draft pick, clearly had a lot of talent. Imagine if that had taken a different path on that crossroad. Where all of a sudden it's the tensions growing between Bohm and the fan base and the distance with the players. It was such an important moment for him, just like Trey Turner last year. And I can't imagine, everyone makes a big deal of the fact that it's Philadelphia. I don't know too many fan bases that have gotten to a point where they're lifting players up the way that they did with Turner last year, the way that they, forgave Bohm for those words, the way they lift up the players. It's become a real home field advantage that does not happen in baseball, I think.
The Bohm situation happened. His name was Scott Rowland. Like the opposite.
Right? Perfect. I'm glad you put a name to it. You're 100% right. That the trajectory of where he was in that moment and where it could have landed is so different than where it is now, where it's this great collaborative feeling between those players on that team and the city. And I think it just makes everything better for all of them.
The great Buster Olney, ESPN, with us. And Buster, I'm glad you brought up the Trey Turner and what we saw from a home field advantage, because that place, I get chills thinking about it, singing and dancing and swaying, right? Like the celebratory mood during the playoffs. I was sat with A-Rod one day, and he's talking about, oh my God, I love this place. Like, I want these people to like me, right? Like, because he was getting booed. Their broadcast booth was set up in the outfield. And he's like, this is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Right? And it was so unique to baseball. And you're right, it's a home field advantage that really doesn't exist in a lot of places.
No. In my time covering baseball, the only other one, I covered the Yankees from 98 to 2001 for the New York Times, and that place was a factor, right? The old Yankee Stadium where the outfield stands would sway when the Yankees would start to win, and players would talk about being intimidated. That doesn't happen in baseball. And now the Phillies have that advantage. And look, I think Atlanta has a great home field. I think San Diego has a great home field. But in terms of being a palpable advantage within games, I think the Phillies have the best place right now. No question.
Hey, just kind of boring a little bit deeper into the roster. You brought up the rotation to start, and I think it's one of their big advantages going forward. Obviously, Wheeler's your ace, but Ranger Suarez, we've been talking a lot about him. 28 years old, and I was just debating a friend about regression, and he's like, well, he's going to regress. And I look at Ranger, and I go, well, couple things. One, he wasn't healthy in spring training the last couple of years. He was dealing with immigration. He was dealing with the paperwork. And when you look at him and you look at his delivery, effortless, not a ton of arm action, he's learned how to pitch. I just think this is who he is.
I completely agree with you. He reminds me of, in terms of his on the mound demeanor, a left-hander with command and presence of David Wells, a pitcher who I covered, because he just seems so calm, like in all these situations. And I think, as David Wells did, he's going to grow as time goes along. Look, I have a fantasy baseball team that I do with my 20-year-old son. He's at Hofstra. And we have a kind of a Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson relationship. Like, we're going at it all the time. And I told him before the season, I'm like, you got to take Ranger Suarez. This is someone who has been good, but this year he's going to go up next level. And you could see that in those big moments last year. And my son was like, no, I don't think so. He's a Braves fan. I think he wasn't giving him credit. And now, Jimmy Johnson, me as Jerry Jones, the only one, I'm going to be coming down on him because he didn't take Ranger Suarez. Let's go, Jake.
Come on, Jerry. Get on him, man. You're right.
Yes.
You're keen eye. You've seen so many prospects come and go. He's got to listen to Dad. All right?
No, he doesn't. You know that. That's how a father-son relationship was. When he was like 15, he was interested in a player in fantasy baseball. And I walked up to the player in spring training, and I said, "Hey, how's that knee coming, or whatever the injury was, right?" And I knew Jake was interested in the guy, and I called Jake right after talking with this player, and I said, "Hey, I just talked to so and so. He says he's feeling good. He says he's ready to go." And my son's response to that was, "Yeah, but on CBS Sportsline they say this about him," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's the classic father-son moment, right?" No, dude, I just talked to the player, and he totally ignores me because I'm an idiot dad.
It's unbelievable, man. So I got my son, I have two boys, 14, 11. My 11-year-old plays 11U travel ball, right?
Yeah.
So I was talking about his swing, right? And he's looking at me like I got 7 heads. I go, dude, I've been around baseball for 100 years, right? I was a scab on the Mets. You remember that? I was a scab on the Mets the strike team back in the day. Like, I could tell you a little bit about it. I brought Charlie Manuel to help him, all right? This freaking kid doesn't want to listen. No, but the other coach said this. Oh, okay. You got to be kidding me.
You can't take it personal, though. It's just fathers and son stuff, right? It's just parent stuff. You're an idiot and I'm an idiot until we prove otherwise. Or until they get a little bit older. When my son is 20, I've retold him that story about the fantasy team and him, like, laughing me off, like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. I've retold that story, and I see this little grin coming on his face. He's realizing, yeah, okay, maybe I get that one wrong.
I love it. Hey, give me a couple of the stories that you're loving MLB wide, all right? Because the Orioles are one that I can't get enough of. Give me some of the storylines you love and some of the kids. There's nothing better about prospects, man. It's our favorite thing.
You're 100% right. First off, Ohtani's amazing. Watching him play. I mean, think about it. This is a year in which, because he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, he's focusing mostly on hitting. And the guy is hitting .370. And he leads the majors in batting average and in home runs. And he's close in RBI. And I was thinking back to when he first signed, he came over here. I talked to so many evaluators who are like, he's going to be an okay hitter. And I've wondered about doubling back to some evaluators and saying, tell me what you didn't see in Ohtani that you now see, because the guy is ridiculous in how great he is. You mentioned the young players. That's always fun. I think the whole baseball world is waiting for Paul Skeens, the number 1 overall pick last year, to be called up at some point by the Pirates. I don't know what they're waiting for, especially with all the injuries they have.
Yeah.
If you throw really hard, they're going to break down at some point. So you might as well take advantage of what you have. I would expect sometime in the next month he'll be in the big leagues, and that'll be an absolute show. And I am curious about what we're seeing with strike zone. You remember that first game when the Phillies played the Braves? Max Fried threw the fastball right down the middle. It was called a ball. I think next year we are headed toward a challenge system in baseball, where you're going to have, for the first time, the ABS system, automatic ball strike system, with teams able to challenge bad calls. I think that's going to be great for the sport when it happens. And because now it feels like day after day after day, and we saw it with the ejection of Aaron Judge and a confrontation with Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager, it feels like the strike zone every day is an issue between umpires and players.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's smart. I mean, you see it during the NBA playoffs, and it's worked seamless. You're getting it right for the most part.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that's what people should understand too, is that the umpires don't want this hanging on them. I mean, you might find a few umpires who are not in favor of the ABS system, but in the end, getting the calls right is what is important. You can remember Jim Joyce when Galarraga had the near perfect game and it was blown, and Jim Joyce, the great umpire, came out after the game. He was in tears because his bad call cost Galarraga a perfect game, and he knew that. And so I think it'll be a good change for baseball when it happens, and I think it's going to happen next year. Are you going to London for that series? No, we've got, I think, Red Sox Yankees on our broadcast.
Oh wow! Yeah.
But I'll be back here. But I'm not making that trip. I went to Yankees Red Sox the first time they played in London a few years ago. I love the international stuff. I think it's great to expose. A long damn season, Anthony.
Yes.
If you can the game in Rickwood we're going to be talking about that's going to
Yes.
be played in Alabama, in June. And I'm sure they spent a lot of time honoring Willie Mays and Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a phenomenal event. The Field of Dream games. We were at Fort Bragg
Yes.
6-7 years ago. That was awesome. I think these events, the Little League Classic that we have
Williamsport,
every year
yeah.
on ESPN, I think those are really valuable games. And I think over the course of a 162-game season, kind of breaks it up for the players a little bit too. Players love doing, I'm sure when they see the Little League Classic on the schedule, like, oh boy, got to make the flight, got to go there. And then when they get there, they just have so much fun, and it's a great experience.
Yeah, it's the best. Brother, it's so great catching up with you, man. Just keep up the great work, and I'm so happy for you. God bless you, man. I'm so happy. You deserve it.
Well, I appreciate it. It's always fun to catch up with you, Anthony.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon. Be well.
I'll see ya.
There he is, the great Buster Olney.
We all silly like the mayor.